Good afternoon. I bid you the official welcome to our event today, which is entitled Sleep Apnea and Tinnitus Ratings Reductions Proposals, a Disability Rights Conversation with New York State Veterans Services. My name is Kristen Rouse. I am a proud veteran of the United States Army, and I serve as Deputy Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at New York State DVS. I am grateful to every one of you for choosing to spend your lunchtime with us today. This virtual event is a little different from the recent events we've had, focusing on diverse populations of veterans for Black History Month, Women's History Month, and Transgender Day of Visibility. Today, we're going to focus on equity based on specific disabilities faced by veterans, but that may be experienced by us in ways that look or feel a little different in our veterans communities. So here's the story of how this came about. A few weeks ago, my friend Patrick Donahue, one of our fantastic panelists that we'll hear from today, he's a fellow Army veteran and a longtime advocate, now an attorney. He called me and asked me, he said, Kristen, have you seen the VA's proposed disability ratings reductions for tinnitus and sleep apnea? Like it was like lightning. My colleague Benjamin Pomerance, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, everybody. So pardon me and my speaking today. But my colleague Benjamin Pomerance, who's also on this event today, and we'll be hearing from. So he's already been working on our agency's response to the VA's rating reduction proposal. But when Patrick called me, in those few minutes, it felt like a lightning bolt. It really showed me how important these commonalities with disabling conditions are to our community, especially those of us who served in the post 9/11 wars and are seeing illnesses impacting ourselves, our friends, and our comrades in ways that I know, at least for myself, have seemed shocking. I myself am a veteran who's impacted by tinnitus, and I'll talk about that later in our panel discussion. But the issue of sleep apnea also feels really personal to me. Just a few months ago, last September, I attended the funeral of my platoon sergeant from my first tour in Afghanistan. His name was Shannon Brown. Shannon and I were based at Bagram Airfield with 10th Mountain Division for 12 months back in 2006 and 2007. Both of us were exposed to 12 full months of smoke blowing across Bagram Airfield from a massive size burn pit, where contractors burned everything from office trash to medical and industrial waste. And even one day we were running together past the huge burn pit and we saw the wreckage of a destroyed cargo plane, like the actual shell of a cargo plane burning in this heaping pile of flames, open flames. And a few years ago, Shannon was diagnosed with sleep apnea. And he, took some basic precautions for sleep apnea, but was otherwise healthy and continued living his life. He had a job after he retired from the Army, and he was traveling for work. Last September, he was on a work trip. He stayed overnight in a hotel. He fell asleep watching television. He liked to fall asleep watching silly shows at night to relax. And so he fell asleep with the TV on and he never woke up. He was 48 years old. And it still feels fresh. Shannon, he's in this photo right here. He's one of the angels on my shoulder, and he's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do every day. And I dedicate my work today and many days to the leadership and life of Shannon Brown. His life ended much too soon. But that's just one example of so many that I know so many of you can offer and have felt personally, as personally as I do. Many service members return home from deployments with obvious disabilities, visible injuries, or even injuries that are invisible that, thanks to medical research and advocacy, we understand much better now today, like post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and many other injuries. But for many service members and veterans, we may not have serious service-connected medical conditions. We may have serious service-connected medical conditions that we may not yet understand are disabilities. or that the VA and medical research hasn't yet caught up yet to understand or recognize as conditions that are service connected, or the VA or medical research may not yet understand how serious, debilitating, and even potentially fatal these conditions are. Especially conditions that are related to toxic exposures from burn pits like the one I described that were prominent on all of our bases in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places where we served. Ultimately, this is an issue of equity, and we need outreach and awareness throughout our veterans communities on these debilitating conditions, or at least the start of them, and awareness about them. I want to take this moment to invite all the veterans who are on this webinar today, or just in the reach of this, or in your own services, to connect with New York State DVS and to sit down with one of our expert veteran benefits advisors. We have veteran benefits advisors across our state who can talk with veterans about medical or mental health issues that you may be experiencing that could be service connected and could ultimately be debilitating and potentially life-threatening. We want to help you access VA medical care if you aren't already doing so, and we want to help you file a claim for service-connected disability so your condition is officially recognized by the VA and that you get what is rightfully due to you for that disability. Disability claims do not take anything away from other veterans. That's a common myth. Your disability claim takes absolutely zero away from any other veteran. And in fact, you standing up and being counted and having your service-connected condition counted by the VA, by the federal government, can help make those issues that you face more visible so that other veterans can benefit ultimately. Please connect with us. I'll drop that contact information in the chat. And also you have my email. If you just reply to this Zoom invitation, you will be reaching me. Let us know how to connect, and because we want you to get the care and the benefits that you're fully entitled to. So with that, I want to introduce our amazing panelists who are joining us today. We're also going to have, I believe, a couple folks drop in when their schedule allows them to. We will be joined by Dr. Praveen Rudaraju, who's a pulmonologist from Northwell Health. He'll be joining us today. He's an expert on sleep apnea. And on the line right now, we have Dr. Harriet Jacobster, an audiologist and expert on what I say tinnitus. She says tinnitus, tomato, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off. We will discuss that, how the pronunciation and who says what. But I'm also really proud to be joined by Brad Hazel, he's coming in from Washington, D.C. today. And I'm so glad that we're able to do these Zooms and bring people in who otherwise we would have a much more difficult time physically getting into New York. Brad is the Assistant Director for Compensation and Pension Policy for the National Veterans Service of the Veterans for Foreign Wars. So he is based in DC, working every day for VFW on policy and the advocacy that changes the situation for veterans nationally. So we thank Brad for all that he does, and we're really glad to have his expertise on the line today. Also on the call today, we have Patrick Donahue, who is himself a fellow Army veteran. And the reason why we are doing this event. He is a longtime advocate, the founder of Project 9 Line in Long Island. I've seen him do stand-up comedy with veterans. He's a tremendous entertainer, and also he's been such a powerful advocate for veterans. He's now an attorney, and he works on law and advocacy for veterans full-time. And so we're really, really grateful that Patrick is with us today. And then also my colleague, Benjamin Pomerance, who is our resident expert here at New York State DVS, advocating for improved policy, regulations, and he's always our go-to guy if we want to understand the complexity of veterans claims, and he manages our agency's training programs and accreditation. of all of our staff. He does such a tremendous amount of work for our agency. It's hard to even describe the breadth of it. So he's absolutely essential to our agency and all that we're able to do. And I know that so many of you on the Zoom today have worked with him over the years. But I'd like to first kick it to Benjamin to explain, like, for those of us on the call who maybe are less familiar with the, how does VA recognize service-connected disability? What does that even mean? And what does the rating system mean? How does VA determine, with a number, with a percentage, how disabled a veteran might be? Like, demystify that for somebody who might be new to this conversation.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for convening this gathering, and to everyone who is taking time from your Wednesday afternoon to join us. Thank you for the work that you do. A lot of familiar names here on this webinar, a lot of great advocates across New York State and beyond. So thank you for the work that you do. All right, demystifying disability compensation. That'll be about 6 hours, so I hope you all have your pillows and blankets with you. I won't take that long, I promise. This concept goes back really to the beginning of our republic, right? Some of the earliest debates about veterans in this country involved what's the proper compensation to give someone who is disabled in service to that country, going all the way back to the American Revolution. And the debates continue, as we all know, to the present day. The basic concept behind the modern disability compensation system, if I can distill it into one sentence, it is this: to properly compensate a veteran for injuries or illnesses sustained in service to the USA, and in particular, to compensate for the impact of those injuries or illnesses on that veteran's earning capacity. That last part about earning capacity, that's going to be pivotal to our conversation this afternoon. You're going to hear that brought back a lot of times about the fact that the idea behind this whole percentage rating system, disability compensation system, is about how adversely has your earning capacity post-service been affected by your injuries sustained in the course of that service. And we'll talk this afternoon about, okay, with these proposed regulations for sleep apnea and tinnitus, et cetera, is the VA actually doing that, or are they missing the mark? The way the system works as far as the mechanics of it is the VA receives a claim from a veteran for compensation. The veteran puts forth their arguments as to why they should receive disability compensation. And the VA basically looks at two things. The first is this condition service connected? What does that mean? That means, is it at least as likely as not that this injury or illness was caused by or made worse by that veteran's military service? Note the words "at least as likely as not." That is our standard of review in anything in this space. Not beyond a reasonable doubt, not clear and convincing evidence, not a preponderance, none of that stuff. At least as likely as not. 50% likelihood, you win, all right? At least in theory. That's the way the law is supposed to work. That's the first thing the VA looks at. Does the evidence support service connection? If the answer is yes, they move to question number two. Question number two is, all right, your service-connected condition, how bad is it? How much does that condition impair or adversely affect your earning capacity? For each grouping, let's say, of medical conditions out there, from migraine headaches to mental health conditions to orthopedic conditions, you name it, the VA has what is referred to as a rating schedule. The rating schedule is contained in Title 38 of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, and they spell out for those different conditions or groups of conditions, okay, you have these symptoms, fine, you get a 0% rating. You have this set of symptoms, 10% rating. This set, 20%, 30%, etc., in increments of 10 all the way to 100. Now, some conditions, they get kind of tricky, and they jump over numbers. Some go 0 to 10 to 30 to 50 to 70 to 100. Some don't even ever get to 100. That's a whole different topic, which we may get to over the course of the afternoon. But generally, it's increments of 10, with 0% being the quote-unquote least severe, 100% being the most severe, okay? And they assign a rating based on what the veteran has shown with respect to their symptoms and how those symptoms match up with the proper rating in that schedule of ratings. Let me hit quickly 4 myths that often pop up in the disability compensation context. So hopefully anybody here who works with veterans or anybody here who has heard these myths yourselves will now know that these things are not true. Number 1, there is no income cap for disability compensation, all right? You can be a billionaire. If you have a medical condition that's caused by or made worse by your service, you can get compensation for that condition. There is no income cap. Secondly, there is no time limit to file an initial claim, okay? My record is working with a veteran who is 64 years removed from his last date in military service. Others of my colleagues have folks who have been even longer removed from their last date in service and gotten disability compensation for them. There seems to be prevailing myths out there of, okay, you have only 10 years to file a claim, or I've heard 5 years sometimes, or yesterday I heard 15 years. None of that's true. You can file your initial claim at any point in time, okay? And that's the work, like Kristen mentioned, that our agency does each and every day. So if you are 50 or 60 years or whatever number of years you moved from your last day in service, don't worry about that. You can still file that claim for compensation and pursue that claim to the nth degree, all right? Myth number 3. This one I hear far too often, and I understand exactly why I hear it, because we think of the VA sometimes as being this monolithic creature, right? The VA. In fact, the VA is broken up into different branches. And that leads to the common myth of, okay, I'm going to a VA medical center for medical care. And so they, of course, will file my claim for me if it becomes apparent to my doctors and nurses that my medical condition is linked to my time in service. That is not true, okay? That veteran who I mentioned that was 64 years removed from his last date in service, his first question to me is, why isn't the VA paying me my compensation yet? And the reason why he was saying that is he had gone to the VA for decades for his medical care, and he assumed that because he was going to the VA, that the VA was taking care of his compensation for him. Does not work that way. The VA healthcare folks and the VA benefits adjudication folks are 2 entirely different arms, and they do not always speak to one another, all right? So just because a veteran says to you, oh, I'm getting my VA benefits, I'm good to go, I've got my VA healthcare, that does not inherently mean that they're getting disability compensation for those conditions, even if their doctors on the healthcare side are saying, oh, of course, your conditions are linked to your time in service. The proper paperwork has to go to the proper people in the VA's complex system to be able to get compensation to be generated. Last myth that we hear all the time is client or claimant loses their case for disability compensation, and they make the assumption that that's the end of the road, that there is nothing further they can do. The VA denies them and that's it. And that absolutely is not the case. One of my roles with the state division is working with our agency's appellate units, where we do every day appellate work on behalf of veterans who were denied a case for disability compensation or some other benefit where that denial was wrongful. Okay, there are many avenues of appeal where you can say, hey, VA, you got this one wrong, and here's why you got it wrong. The VA has a substantial error rate when it comes to their initial claims, and that's why these appellate avenues exist. So just because you may have lost that initial claim for compensation, please do not go away thinking that's your only bite at the apple. There are many other opportunities that can be made available to you. Now, there are time deadlines involved in filing those appeals. It's important to work with someone who is an advocate in this space who, number one, knows those deadlines, and number two, can get that set of documentation filed with the right folks by deadline, all right? But just because the initial claim has not gone your way, that does not necessarily have to be the end of the road, right? So 4 myths. Now you know what the myths are, what the realities are, and I'll turn it back over to Kristen. Thanks.
Thank you, Benjamin, for that explanation. That was very clarifying, and every time I hear you talk, I learn something. And you know, just when I think that I know a lot, I keep learning more from you. So I really am grateful for you sharing that. Brad, could you talk a little bit about the process of like that you're looking at, like where VA is saying, okay, we have a rating system, here's what we do, you know, like just as Benjamin described. But now we're putting this idea, this proposal out for public comment. So there's this thing called the Federal Register. Like, could you describe for for folks who are absolutely not familiar at all with the policy work that you do, responding to this kind of thing? Could you explain for the unindoctrinated what the VA is proposing and what the process is around that, and if and what VFW is doing in response, and just sort of that process, so that we can understand the framing of this conversation about the VA's proposal.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for having me. I'm grateful to be here and involved with us. So anytime the federal government wants to make changes to federal regulations, they have to follow a very specific process. Fortunately, one of the aspects of that process is informing the public in such a way that the public does have an opportunity to respond to the federal government and offer their insights to the federal government for those changes. And like Kristen was saying, that is done through the Federal Register. So anytime there is a proposed rule, a proposed change, VA must post that in the Federal Register, and for proposed regulation changes, they must give 60 days for the public to then offer feedback to the federal government on either why they agree or disagree with those decisions. After the comment period has closed, VA is then required to go through every single one of those comments, and any substantive comments VA must actually respond to. The reason why I say substantive comments is when you do go into the Federal Register, all the comments are public, so anyone can go in and view those. Oftentimes, some of them won't necessarily be pertinent to the actual proposed change, but many of them are. So VA does have to sort through those and address them. Depending on the comments, how they're substantiated with citations, scientific studies, often it will occur that VA might then have to go back and propose different changes. So anytime anything's posted in the Federal Register, one of the things I do on behalf of the Veterans of Foreign Wars is I review those proposed regulations. I look at the sources the VA cites, one, to confirm that those sources are being cited appropriately, because unfortunately, one of the issues that I've come across when VA does propose changes is they will cite studies, but they will only cite the portion of the studies that are in favor of their proposed regulation, and it might be missing key aspects of the actual study or the overall intent of the study or the findings of the study. So what I'm currently doing on behalf of VFW is formulating our comments, not just from the aspect of the changes to the VA schedule for rating disabilities, the VASRD, but also how those impact access to benefits as a whole. Another check and balance that there is with the system is there is also a federal advisory committee. They're considered special government employees. They're only government employees for the purposes of those specific meetings. So it's an independent body that then comes together that also looks at those changes to then offer input. I am fortunate that I'm actually able to, that I actually serve on the advisory committee for disability compensation. And we've already had one meeting since these proposed changes. And we are actually going to be holding more meetings, so we can also formulate a response directly to the secretary pertaining to these changes as well. Kristen, does that in a general sense kind of go over the type of information you were looking for, or did you have any specific questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really illuminating. And also, like, just that you were, VFW and many other, national veterans organizations, you know, the legacy VSOs, the big six, are there every day in DC and interacting with senior VA staff, and to hear, you know, that you're advising the VA secretary directly, and you know that there's a constant stream of input. That doesn't mean that everything goes perfect, but it means that that the views of veterans do get to the structures that are supporting us. Like, there is an ongoing conversation. And so, you know, so public comments do matter. Your membership in organizations matters. Raising your voice within these organizations, it matters, because it does influence, like, the work that you do, Brad, and the voice that you have at, you know, your seat at the table. And so, you know, so it's great to know that, like, you're there, you're there, and part of this process. But could you maybe talk about, like, what what are you, and you know, what's VFW and, you know, other organizations doing in terms of, you know, you mentioned the public comments, but, like, could you just maybe talk about what you can of the response that you're helping VFW make to this particular, you know, maybe not in detail, you know, about the conditions, but, like, just sort of the process that VFW is following to submit comments, to be substantive and influential on this particular proposal.
Absolutely. So as soon as the comments were published in the Federal Register, immediately started reviewing them, so we could start to identify inconsistencies or potential concerns. Additionally, we also started to hold meetings with some of the other larger veterans service organizations, so we could also present a unified front to the VA, and not only that, that way, instead of only having one individual from an organization looking at it, everyone coming together, expressing our concerns, because there might be other aspects that I might not have considered that another organization might have come up with. Pertaining the proposed changes to the VA rating schedule that we're discussing today, we are extremely concerned about VA wanting to not allow tinnitus to be rated as its own disability. That is a significant concern for us. For those that are on the call, just because a veteran has a disability doesn't mean that VA will necessarily acknowledge or compensate that disability. And one of the key points that I do want to bring up is with hearing loss. A veteran can be diagnosed with hearing loss by VA, and yet can submit a claim for hearing loss, but VA can still deny it because it doesn't meet the criteria for hearing loss for VA purposes. Well, if they have no service connection for anything, and they don't meet income criteria, then they might not, it's very possible that they might not actually have the ability to access VA healthcare. So in an instance like this, a veteran might have tinnitus, where it's clearly caused by service. They might have hearing loss, but the hearing loss might not be bad enough by VA standards for it to be compensated. And this proposed rule would essentially now prohibit that veteran from receiving health care from VA for that. Whereas currently, if a veteran does have tinnitus and it's service connected, a VA audiologist can issue hearing aids that can essentially create white noise and do different things to make that more manageable. Well, this proposed change would essentially eliminate that veteran from being able to receive healthcare at all. with VA healthcare, there's different priority groups based on overall rating criteria will determine where that veteran is placed in that priority group. And with the reduction for sleep apnea, right now, if a veteran has a service-connected sleep apnea, requiring the use of an assisted breathing device such as a CPAP or APAP with the 50% rating, that would automatically place them in priority group 1 for VA healthcare, which is very appropriate considering the other medical conditions that over the course of the time, sleep apnea, the overall impact that has to the body, which once again, but by this proposed reduction to the rating schedule, it would essentially take those veterans, they would still be able to receive treatment for the sleep apnea. But now, if that's the only thing they're rated for, they would remove the ability to receive VA healthcare for other conditions. So as a whole, we try to look at the different aspects that this will impact on veterans, not just specifically to those rated conditions, but how it'll impact them overall. And it's essentially the comments that we're drafting are going to correlate that to VA.
Wow. Thank you for going in depth on that. Like that, I mean, that's like this is the real work. And it, because like so much of, just managing percentages, numbers, quantities, is really, it's opening the door or closing the door to veterans in their ability to access, as you're saying, not only service-connected disability, but also the healthcare itself, and because of these eligibility rules. Patrick, you are who brought this, to my attention, and Benjamin was already on this, but just, like veteran to veteran, like you're like, hey, Kristen, did you know about this? This is crazy. But, can you talk about, how, what you're looking at in this VA proposal, and how you're looking at, you've been crafting essentially comments that rebut this proposal, and that you're going to be submitting as an attorney. Because again, this is open for public comment, and it's open for public comment until April 18th. So today is April 13th. So 5 days from now, so I see like Cleveland in the chat there, is asking, when does, basically do all the responses have to be in before the 60-day comment period? I believe that's a yes, not if, yeah, it's a yes. So we have 5 more days to get this in, and I'm sorry that we're only giving you 5 days notice, but you got 5 days to look at this if you would like to comment. But Patrick, if you could talk about what you're working on and what you're prompted to look at with this comment period.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you for putting this together, and thank you for all the panelists and for everybody who's listening right now, because this seems to be one of the most impactful proposals that has ever touched or will touch veterans of our generation and all generations. And it's really scary what they're trying to do. And I believe it's a slippery slope. And I'll just touch on tinnitus briefly, but they're trying to bring tinnitus under hearing loss. Tinnitus is hearing sound that doesn't exist. It's the exact opposite of hearing loss. So how could it be rated under hearing loss when it's hearing things that don't exist? I don't understand that. Regards to their sources and their studies in these proposals and impact statements, myself, along with Congressman Zeldin's office and ABC Investigative News, have been trying to get these studies just to look at, or even a citation of one of the studies, and they're unable to do that. And it's been weeks, and we've contacted every department that they mention in the proposal, as well as their public affairs department, as well as their congressional liaison. No one can bring these studies or the citations of such studies forward. But I found them. I did the due diligence. I believe I found all the studies that they are citing in their proposal and impact study. And I cited them because they are more beneficial to our side, just as this gentleman was saying earlier. right? So I don't even see where they're getting their information from. And this whole proposal rests on these alleged studies. And one of the studies that they cite in the economic impact study, which is of no help to them at all, was done in Iran in 2013. It's not even an American study. So out of the two citations I could find, one done by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, which is far more favorable to our side, and the study from Iran, of all places. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. We can't do our own studies to provide information that is the backing for the proposal to remove $100 billion of benefits from disabled veterans. I mean, this is it's very odd thing we're facing. So this new proposal regarding sleep apnea is going to eliminate over 90% of people that would be due 50% rating currently. It'll put them at zero. That's what the VA is saying. And that's going to save the VA like $56 billion just over the next 10 years. Now, why this is alarming is because we're starting to win our sleep apnea cases. The nexus has been proven. The hardest thing to prove is not the exposure. It's not the current diagnosis. It's the medical nexus connecting the two. Now, by way of medical studies and good attorneys, we've been able to prove that sleep apnea was in fact caused directly by exposure or secondary or by aggravation. All three routes to service connection have been proven for sleep apnea, and it's costing the VA a lot of money because of this extremely debilitating illness that almost all vets who are exposed to dioxin, either Agent Orange or burn pit, have. So they claim that they are going to not touch anybody who's currently rated. Now, I find that hard to believe because it's the VA's regular business practice to occasionally reassess veterans who are currently service connected. So they bring them in for a C&P without them asking for an increase, and they reassess them. Now, if they were to do that for, say, tinnitus or sleep apnea, after this proposal went through, if it was approved, they would be reassessing those veterans under the new guidelines, not the old ones. So I find it hard to believe that VA is saying with a straight face that they're not going to touch anybody who's currently rated. So make no mistake, this is a slippery slope, I believe, that once they take it away for future veterans, which is really messed up on its own. So if you applied before this day, you get it. If not, you don't. That seems kind of unfair. But then what they've done in the past is reassess veterans who are not seeking an increase. And if they were to do that, which it's already their regular business practice, if they were to do that regarding tinnitus or sleep apnea, those reassessments would be done under the new guidelines, and the veterans could, in fact, lose their current ratings. So that's what I mean by this is a slippery slope. Like, yeah, we're just talking about the future vets, which I care about a lot, not just the ones who are currently rated, by the way. The VA doesn't seem to. But then they may, as they already do, reassess veterans who are not seeking increases, and in which case they will, in fact, use the new guidelines. So I've been asking the VA some very simple questions that they can't answer, and alongside asking them for their studies and citations for these proposals. And so has the VA ever studied sleep apnea's relation to burn pits, or its relation to PTSD, or its relation to PTSD medication, or to TBI? Have they ever done studies seeing if there's any correlation between those? I don't know. I asked them, and they haven't responded. Have they done studies regarding the effect of the 3M earplugs and that's effect on tinnitus? I don't believe they have. Or how about the lawsuits against the CPAP manufacturers? Have they done any studies regarding those products and those exposures regarding our current diagnoses? I don't believe they have. And if they have, I'd like to see them. So the VA is proposing within this proposal to extensively revise the rating criteria for sleep apnea to primarily provide compensation that is more compatible with earning impairment. That's the key word, more compatible with earning impairment. Now, what's changed? I know oxygen therapy helps, CPAPs and APAPs, but they are not the end-all be-all of sleep apnea. Veterans who are using these devices to assist them with their sleep apnea are having great results, but their lives aren't completely, they're not healed from this, and they still have all the debilitating effects and the long-term effects of sleep apnea that does not make up for their inability to earn as much money as they would without it. Being tired all day, being depressed and anxious, and your body resetting every couple minutes for the whole night has a very detrimental effect on our health. And the VA is saying that our earning capacity is not impaired by this, or it's impaired less than it used to be. And I see no evidence of this. And typically, when you're proposing something and you're citing sources, you usually have to actually cite them. Like in a 7th grade term paper, you have to cite your sources. Somehow the government doesn't have to do that when they're proposing to remove $100 billion from disabled veterans. I don't know how that's okay. So that's why this meeting is important today, because we get to raise awareness about this. And the only citations that were within the economic impact study, because there's no citations in the proposal, are far more beneficial to the veterans retaining the level of service connection that is already being offered for both tinnitus and sleep apnea. And unless they have or can produce studies or cite anything that shows otherwise, we as Americans need to let them know we're not willing to stand for this, and we're not going to allow them to make these changes.
This is, I mean, and thank you, Patrick, for just ringing the alarm bell on this. And Brad, did you want to chime in right quick?
If I could, just real quick, because I am under the impression that a lot of people on this call are accredited reps that help people that help veterans with their claims. Mm-hmm. With what Patrick was saying, especially how VA has said that, this is not going to have an impact of those veterans that are already rated for this. If any of you do see VA reduce veterans rating based on this new criteria only, that is against regulations. 38 CFR 3.951 specifically prohibits VA reducing a rating based on a change to the rating schedule alone. So if you do see veterans that are already rated, say 50% of sleep apnea for use of CPAP, and the VA brings them in for a routine future examination, and they do propose to reduce them based on the new criteria, please, please, please strongly advise the veteran appeal that reduction because that is against regulations. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, Brad. Thank you for clarifying that. And representing veterans in their claims it almost requires a law degree, right? The level of expertise is really so complex, and there's veterans who file their own claims, and many have success. But again, if you're a veteran out there and and you need assistance with your claim, like, we are ready to help you, New York State Division of Veteran Services. And also, like, the VFW is also able to, they're accredited to represent, and there's attorneys who are ready to help with more complex issues. But please get the help that you need, where we can be a conduit for you to get the assistance that you need to file your claim and to get what you are due. But I want to next invite a veteran who is a fellow veteran, a fellow Army veteran. Sorry, everybody, I'm stacking a lot of Army veterans today. But Mike Munoz is a three-tour Iraq veteran. He's also been an advocate on Capitol Hill at New York City Hall for veterans. He's been traveling today. I'm really glad that he could join us. But I asked Mike to speak to if you could speak to your experience with sleep apnea, and just tell us your journey from that initial invasion of Iraq up to your the situation with your VA claim. If you want to talk about that and the toxic exposures and what you've experienced, just as a veteran perspective.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. My name is Mike Munoz. As Kristen said, I'm a 14-year active duty and reserve Army veteran. I was part of the initial invasion in 2003 into Iraq, where we also wore MOP level gear. In Iraq, we burned everything, as everyone knows, but in the beginning, that was where, for me, the burn pit started. We burned everything from our fecal matter to trash. So as you know, as you've been talking today, I returned from my second deployment in September of 2006. And I ETS'd in January of 2007. I was in a classroom 2 days later, starting college. I initially applied for, I'm not sure if everyone aware, I had TRICARE for 6 months when I got out. And in that time, towards the end of it, I got diagnosed with sleep apnea within 6 months of ETSing and within a year of returning from Iraq. I was initially denied a claim because it wasn't in my service record. This was in 2007, before post 9/11 GI Bill or before any of this came, any studies or anything was done. So back in those days, if it wasn't in your record, as we all know, the VA's favorite statement is not service connected. At the time when I was ETSing, there was a record number of enlisted and officers leaving the service due to high tempo and deployments. So the sleep clinic at Fort Campbell in the fall of 2006 was fully booked, and it was never noted in my records. So that is one of the reasons they say I was not service connected, because there was nothing in my records. I do suffer from sleep apnea. I was issued a CPAP machine, but eventually by the VA, but still not service connected. I have difficulty using my CPAP machine because I sleep on my stomach, and no matter what pressures they've adjusted the CPAP machine to, my body I fall asleep with it on and I wake up with it off, and I rip it off because it doesn't work for me. I believe, after all the information that's come out in the years, that it is due to the burn pits and toxic exposure, and I'm currently gonna refile my claims, and I'm gonna use the New York State DVS to I had another VSO, and I'm gonna switch because I wasn't happy with my previous VSO, and that is all. Does anybody have any questions? Or
No, we're gonna make sure that we loop you in and we get your claim taken care of, Mike, for sure. And you know, and I'm glad that we talked about it. But you know, part of, you know, you mentioned, you know, when we talked earlier that, you know, part of what's not notated in your service records is the geography of where you work. You want to talk about that for a second?
oh yes, so the registering, for what I found when they came out with the burn registry, was it's not an easy system to register for. One, when I logged in,
and you're referring to the VA's burn pit registry. They have
yes,
a formal burn pit registry, and there's a whole process that you have to go through to sign up for it.
yes, and part of that process is, the first thing is, because when we arrived and left country, we arrived in Kuwait. They had me in Kuwait for the year, but I found it very difficult to try to upload or try to change the information to prove that I wasn't in Kuwait all year. That's where we entered country, that's where we left country. But there's no manifest for the C-130s or the convoys we took into Iraq. So the website I'm dissatisfied with, and every time I've tried to start it, sometimes I get motivated. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna spend a couple hours on this, and it's so frustrating dealing with it that, for my mental health, I have to log off. So I'm gonna be working with the VSO any VSOs, or with the state, as well as anyone willing to help me get through that process, because I spent 2 years and a little more in Iraq. And this is something that we're fighting for now, and I just think it needs to be improved.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I'm really grateful for you, finding a quiet place where you are and to share that story with us. Because
Appreciate it, Kristen.
I mean, your story is so much like the veterans that we serve. I mean, like, you are the veteran we serve, and coming to us with, like, you're highly competent on, so much in accessing the VA and VA healthcare, but these processes are extremely frustrating, and you may have been let down or by, processes in the past that were more difficult, or, and I mean, and this is the recent past, and, this is not to mention all of those of you who served longer ago and are still struggling with issues or still struggling with claims. And so, so Mike, we're going to take care of you, but also I encourage veterans who are on this call or within the organizations that you serve to, to step forward and let us work through this with you. But just to, that's touching on Mike's issue with sleep apnea, and I just want to give voice to my own experience with tinnitus. Like, I've served in the military for 27 years, and, been exposed to all measures of, weapons firing, aircraft, loud vehicles, and it, and over 3 tours in Afghanistan where I was, preparing for deployment on weapons ranges with earplugs that weren't always the best. Because maybe I forgot my good ones and I was using the little foamies or, other ones. But, weapons ranges, all of the, the pre-deployment qualifications, but, all of my travel and deployments were on aircraft, whether it's, C-5s, C-130s, but also helicopter lifts all across Afghanistan. And sometimes, like, especially on helicopters, like, you gotta, like, scream at somebody to say, "Where are we?" And you take out your earplug and everything's like hissing outside. It's just like, it must be like outer space or something, where it's just like loud, it's like you don't even register it as noise, it's so loud. And you're like trying to like get someone to scream in your ear what stop they're at. But I never realized the damage I was doing to my hearing. Fortunately, I still have very functional hearing, but I know it was impacted by that. But it really didn't occur to me until I was talking with, over the last couple of years with, I mean, my last deployment was in 2012, so this was, the damage was done quite some time ago. But in the last couple of years of, talking with my spouse, talking with a therapist, trying to put words to how I'm thinking through something, how I'm experiencing something, thinking through that, I finally heard the tinnitus in my ears. I finally heard the loud ringing in my ears that is constant. That is maybe, I've described as something in between a pinprick that's constant and just a loud screaming noise that I just try to tune out. It's always there. Sometimes it's louder, sometimes it's much more bearable, but it's almost like an itch you can't scratch, and you just have to live with it. But it definitely impacts how I'm processing information or conversations or stressful moments. And it is real. It impacts me all of the time. I see in the comments, like somebody already said, tinnitus is a reality for me 24/7. And so it is a very real thing. And I didn't even realize that it was impacting me until I didn't hear it until I heard it. And it never goes away. And so it's something that, the different veterans may experience differently, but it's very real and it's very present for so many people. I'd like to invite Dr. Jacobster to, oh yeah, Patrick, if you hit me, what you got?
Hi, Kristen. I just wanted to touch on one thing again. So Brad had brought up the law 38 CFR 3.951, and I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to talk about what it actually means, okay? It says, a readjustment to the schedule for rating disability shall not be grounds for reduction of a disability rating in effect on the date of the readjustment unless medical evidence establishes that the disability to be evaluated has actually improved. So what that law is talking about is that the fact that the law is changing is not enough reason to reassess veterans. But guess what happens if they're doing a reassessment? They bring you in to a medical evaluation, at which point they will determine, if they so choose, that you've improved. So then that's the reason that they may choose to reduce those are currently rated, right? So the fact that they're changing the law is not grounds to reduce anybody, and it's actually unlawful. But if they so choose, when they do their periodic reassessments that they currently do, and they bring you in and they find one improvement at that C&P, that's all it takes is one little improvement of your symptoms, then they can reduce you. So that there's no protection for if you're currently connected. I know that reduction is real because it happened to me. I was reduced. They called me in for a C&P, and I had a law school final that day, and I could not go. So I told them, hey, I can't go, but I'm willing to come another time. So they never reached back out to me. I forgot about it. A year later, and this is right before I'm about to graduate law school and start studying for the bar exam. The rug got pulled out from under me. I got dropped from 70 to 0 effective a week from that day. That's how I was notified. I was notified that on October 31st, your payments will end. It was like October 20th. But my last semester of law school, I was dropped from 70 to 0, not because had nothing to do with my symptomology. It was just because I did not appear at the C&P, which I could not go to. So then it took me a whole nother year and a half to win back my benefits, which were rightfully mine. I didn't improve. So I retained my 70, but I had lost all that compensation for that time, which could have completely ruined me. Luckily, I was able to sustain myself. But if I was in a different place, like the Patrick Donahue from, say, 8 years ago, would not have been able to handle that. And it would have had me go through who knows what would have happened to me in that case. And I know there's a lot of vets that are susceptible to where I was 8 years ago. I was in a different place when this happened, thank God, because it didn't completely ruin my life, but it really messed me up. So I know the fear of reductions out there. And I know that once they change these laws, that they're gunning for everyone else, because that's what they do. They're trying to save money. They're proposing savings too. This is another weird thing about this, right? They're proposing savings. Now, they're talking about money that they're not paying out yet, right? These are people that did not yet apply. How are they saving money that's not yet spent? It's impossible. You can't forecast savings for things you're not spending currently. So where is this $100 billion in savings even coming from, right? Is it coming from people that have not yet applied? Because then they wouldn't be technically savings because they're not paying that money out yet. So is that potential savings coming from people that they're going to reduce? I don't know, but that's actually more plausible. Because as I said, you can't save money on something that you're not currently spending. So I don't even understand the whole proposal. And I've spent my whole last 3 weeks of my life diving into this stuff. I understand less now. And I'm a VA accredited attorney who has dealt with I lived at the VA for months, recovering from my own disabilities. I have severe obstructive sleep apnea. I have tinnitus, and I have a brain tumor from my exposure to burn pits. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I'm still here able to talk and represent my fellow veterans. But the fact that the VA is able to pull this shenanigans on us and then not answer us, not answer Congress, not answer the media, not answer veterans. Now we have a lot of us here. Someone asked in the text, what can they do? So what can you do is tell your fellow Americans that we will not stand for this. Tell them to notify their local representatives that they will not stand for this. We do not want this. We do not want these changes made. We do not want them made for every reason in the book, unless they can show a good reason, an actual reason why they should make these changes. Then we're willing to talk. But they don't have any grounds for this other than saving money, other than picking the pockets of disabled veterans. That's what this proposal is all about. It's about nothing else.
No, I mean, it's heartbreaking, and it's just a devastating calculus where we're talking about balance, is a government budget going to be balanced on the backs of disabled veterans? And that's, that's why we're talking about this as a disability rights issue. And your fire is so important, Patrick. And this is just the beginning of the conversation. These comments close in 5 days. But please carry that fire to your communities and to your comments to push the VA on this ratings change. And also you can let your elected officials know. It's their job to represent you. Congress is effectively the board of directors for the VA healthcare system and benefit system. So VA is broken into two parts. There's the veterans health and veterans benefits. And like we said, like Benjamin mentioned, they don't necessarily talk to each other. And so the healthcare, we have healthcare professionals that are ready to take care of you. But the benefits administration is really in many ways like a giant loss prevention unit. And so, and talking about cost savings and this kind of thing. But VA Secretary Dennis McDonough is the secretary of both of those wings of the VA. And so, this is government, and we the people get to have a say in our government. And so if you are so moved, then please make sure that you voice your concern and your input to your government in the ways that you can. But in terms of like the actual, the complexity of the issues that, VA is basically proposing to reduce ratings for both tinnitus and sleep apnea based on, Patrick, as you pointed out, incomplete studies or very selectively interpreted studies. And so, so to bring, a respected scientist in the room, Dr. Jacobster, if you could talk about tinnitus as, like in the comments, we're mentioning that, 10% is, the VA says, okay, if you have currently, the VA is saying, you get 10% if you can prove that your tinnitus is service connected. And, and this proposal is basically proposing to change that and to say that tinnitus is not its own issue. It's a hearing loss issue, which is not, may or may not be true, but, but Dr. Jacobster, if you could talk a little bit about tinnitus as an issue and what your concerns are related to this ratings reduction.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you, Kristen, and everyone else for inviting me to this very important discussion. And I am so honored to be able to help our veterans in any way that I can. Okay. The problem with what the VA proposes to do is they are associating tinnitus with hearing loss. They are saying, in essence, that the hearing loss is what causes the tinnitus. This is absolutely not true. And they're still working on the old assumption, and I do say old, that tinnitus is a manifestation of a pathology in the auditory system. It's not that it's not true, but it's not the only reason for tinnitus. And I love that you all are bringing up the burn pits as well, because believe it or not, something like a burn pit, the noxious fumes, that is also a root cause of tinnitus, believe it or not. So what exactly is tinnitus? Yes, tinnitus is a perception, and that's the key word. It is a perception, which indicates that it is more a mental or cognitive disability than a hearing disability. Okay, that's number one. So it is an abnormal perception of a sound that does not really exist. It exists in your head. All right. It comes from some type of abnormal neurobehavior. The fact that hearing loss and tinnitus are the most common comorbidities is what the VA is in essence saying, well, if you have one, you're going to have the other. Okay. Yes, noise is one of the most common causes of tinnitus, but it is not the only one. And like I said to Kristen before, do you know that you can have a neck injury? Perfect hearing, never been near noise, never been anything, but you get a neck injury, you twist your neck, you can get tinnitus because of the neural activity from your neck to your brain. So what is tinnitus? Well, there's all different types of tinnitus, and everybody reacts to the tinnitus in a different way. So just a few statistics. Some of the statistics from the American Tinnitus Association estimate that about 50 million or more people in this country have reportedly suffered from tinnitus. Okay? Of those 50 million, anywhere from 5 to 10% suffer so much from this mental condition that they can't work, they can't concentrate, they cannot socialize, they cannot even sit and read a book in quiet because this noise is so persistent. And even a few of them, not even a few, many of them, when you combine it with the trauma of the military, actually contemplate and go as far as to commit suicide. All right. And they are relegating this condition that has such a mental impact on people, an emotional impact, and saying, yeah, well, it's not really a disability. Well, then they are going against their very definition of what a disability is. If a disability, according to the VA, impacts earning, is an earning impairment, and it cannot be treated, or many people are so affected by this constant sound in their head that no, it affects the brain. It actually alters the memory and concentration centers of the brain. And that the more recent studies, which of course the VA does not want to cite, okay, the more recent studies from 2015, 2019, 2020 have actually done PET scans, functional MRIs of the brain of tinnitus sufferers. And they actually see those parts that are affected by concentration, by memory, have decreased neural activity. That is not a hearing loss. That is a brain loss. That is a cognitive loss. So let's take the burn pits, okay? So let's say you have a veteran, been exposed to noise and the burn pits. And I don't know if any studies yet have been done on the association of burn pits per se, but there are very definite correlations between noxious fumes and certain chemicals that will cause tinnitus. I'm sorry, I lost my thought. So you have a veteran. They've been exposed to the burn pits. They've been exposed to noise, to gunfire, and they have tinnitus. But because of this new ruling, they are going to be denied that disability because it's the hearing loss. The hearing loss caused the tinnitus, when it is borne out by scientific fact that is not always necessarily the case. And as Patrick mentioned, and as Brad mentioned, to relegate this debilitating condition, yes, some people don't suffer as much as others. And if you ask me, I think just a 10% static rating is, even that is incorrect, is not even sufficient. Another proof that this is a mental condition, not just a hearing condition, is that how do we really treat tinnitus? How do we really treat it? The most effective treatments, you don't just put a hearing aid on. That's not going to do it. The most effective treatments for the tinnitus are cognitive therapies. We have to alter the thought, the way the brain actually neurologically works to treat the tinnitus correctly, to treat it effectively. That's not a hearing loss. Question?
That is so important. And I mean, thank you, Dr. Jacobster. That is so important to know. And I mean, and like that, I am informed. I have learned, and and as you pointed out, like like sort of the layperson to the audiologist yourself, and also the tinnitus, like the doctors definitely say tinnitus, and the rest of us who are advocates or describing our condition, many of us will say tinnitus. Again, tomato, tomato, but thank you so much for informing us on that. I know, Benjamin, you wanted to share something. Please, please speak up.
Great, and thank you again for all the panelists and the comments that are made. Very informative and right on point. In working with my colleague Paul Stotz in putting our public comment together, there's two themes that kept coming up. One theme is unrealism or unrealistic, right? There's so much what the VA is proposing here that is unrealistic. It is unrealistic, as you heard Dr. Am I on mute or am I off mute?
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay, I guess I have a weird warning on my screen here. As you just heard, that there is unrealism in saying, oh, tinnitus or tinnitus is a byproduct of hearing loss. No, it's not. That's not what the medical science tells us. It's unrealistic to say, oh, you've got a CPAP machine, you're good, right? Everything's fine, right? No impairment at all on your earning capacity. No, that's not what the realism of the situation is. So unrealistic is one theme. The other one that we have not talked about as much today yet is ambiguity. And I want to highlight that because the Secretary of the VA has certain obligations defined for the Secretary by federal case law when it comes to ambiguity. Jones versus Shinseki from the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. If the Secretary wishes to establish a diagnostic code containing specific criteria for a rating, it is his obligation to do so clearly, not ambiguously. So we look at, for example, the sleep apnea proposal, and we see terms of incomplete relief, partially effective, and ineffective, all of which are going to have an immediate and direct impact on somebody's sleep apnea rating if this proposal goes into full effect. So if you get the CPAP machine and if you have incomplete relief, that has one impact on your rating versus if it's just simply ineffective, that's a different impact. And partially ineffective, it's a whole different thing as well in terms of the percentage you get. But what does that mean? And we can look through that comment all day long. We are not going to see a definition in there from the VA as to what those terms that they are using mean. I mean, is incomplete relief anything under 100% relief? Or not? Is there some other threshold that we have to be looking at here? How is the VA going to measure relief or lack thereof? What objective criteria are they going to use to make this determination? All of that stuff is absent from the comment that they are putting out, right? From what they're saying here, they're using terms, but they are not telling anyone what those terms are, which falls short of what the VA secretary obligation is as established in Jones versus Shinseki. Now, one comment I often get when I talk about this is, but what about administrative deference, right? What about this idea that agencies in the government can use a term and they have the authority under this principle to define what this term means as they see fit? It doesn't quite work that way. And the reason why it doesn't is a U.S. Supreme Court decision called Kaiser versus Wilkie. Okay, that's Wilkie as in the former VA secretary, where the court looked at this old principle of administrative deference, of the people who draft regs being able to not define a term and then later on say, oh yeah, we meant this or that. Not so good, right? Not so good in modern times, not so good with our ideas of what due process of law actually means. So there's a lot more constraints than there used to be around this idea of deferring to an agency's definition when that definition is not even defined in the regulation they're putting out. So we need to pay attention, I think, not just to the unrealistic aspects, the non-medically realistic aspects of what the VA is putting out here for these conditions, but also the ambiguities and to point those out. So that way, if this does go into effect, despite our objections to it, that advocates can step forward and say, hey, what about this? What is ineffective relief? What is partial relief? What is any of those terms? And to bring those cases forward to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims and beyond, if needed, to really press the VA on this. We've seen this historically in so many other areas, right? For a long time, total disability based on individual unemployability. Use this term substantial gainful employment. You have to be unable to secure and maintain substantial gainful employment. For a long time, the VA never defined that term. And it took the courts, and a case called Ray versus Wilkie, to say what that term actually means. And so if these terms do go into effect, if the VA does keep going down this road, I urge all the advocates who are here who practice before those federal courts to really hold the VA accountable on these definitional issues and these ambiguous issues, and to say, hey, you're saying this is not a level of ineffective relief or incomplete relief. Tell us how. What is your definition, VA, of this term, which you have used, and really hold their feet to the fire on that topic.
That is a great point. And we're so fortunate to have, I mean, your expertise, Benjamin, and I mean, like, we got two attorneys on here, Benjamin and Patrick, and, you know, and a doctor, Dr. Jacobster, and also just a note that it looks like Dr. Praveen Raju from Northwell Health was not able to get on with us today. We can backtrack what those, what the technical issues were on that, but hopefully we can bring you some additional information on sleep apnea in a follow-up. But I want to go back to you, Brad, and maybe think through, like, you know, I know you're not able to predict the future, none of us are, but based on what you've seen from your vantage point in DC, like, what do you think some of the options are for how the VA might respond to the comments from Patrick, from New York State DVS, from the different organizations that are based there in DC, from VFW? Like, what do you think the VA might do with those comments that they receive before Monday? And, you know, do you think they might adjust course on this?
I think it's very possible. I know that this is, I think this is the second time that they have proposed similar changes with sleep apnea. And based on the number of comments that were received, along with the pushback, VA essentially took those regulations back to the drawing board. Can't speak with any certainty that they'll be doing that again. The fact, and I know we're talking about the ENT OSA tinnitus, but the fact that they released them at the same time that they released the proposed changes to the VASRD for mental health, I think that's how VA was trying to offset costs. But based on the fact that everyone is coming together, I'm certainly hopeful that VA will go back and redraft regs. We are the VFW is going to be respectfully requesting that pertaining some of the proposed changes. We'll wait and see whether or not they actually adhere to that or not. I do know there's going to be some other additional follow-up conversations between the advisory committee for disability conversation, and they're going to be publishing a report to the secretary. And based on the conversations that have already taken place, I believe that they are along the same train of thoughts that all the advocates here are saying. So I'm certainly hopeful, but until I see VA start responding to comments, we'll wait and see.
And from your vantage point, do you think that like maybe pressure from members of Congress or senators or, you know, or other, you know, other folks in DC, like, would that be helpful towards this cause?
Absolutely, it definitely would not hurt. So absolutely, the more awareness that can be raised for a multi-front approach, absolutely would definitely help.
Yeah, and again, like, I just can't thank you enough, Brad, for all that you're doing on behalf of veterans. You know, for the VFW and working with all the great advocates there at the Capitol for veterans. You know, and so a question in the chat from Cleveland asking about the VA's authority to even make these changes unilaterally. So Cleveland is saying, you know, per 38 CFR, can the VA even do, like, what's their right to do this? And what recourse do we have? So the recourse that we're talking about is this public comment period that's open until Monday. But Benjamin, could you speak to the VA's authority, or Brad, you know, jump in?
Sure. So I'll lead off if you want, and Brad, feel free to jump in, Patrick, and anybody else as well. I mentioned at the beginning, the VA has that schedule of ratings, right, which talks about what the proper percentages and the criteria are for different disabilities. That becomes the basis of their authority here. This is a change or a series of changes to the schedule of ratings. And the VA has the authority under their rulemaking ability as a federal agency to go in and say, okay, we are going to adjust these regulations now in terms of the rating schedule and develop new criteria, according to them, based on more modern medical science. And of course, you've already heard plenty of rebuttals to that concept here. What's important to keep in mind, though, and this goes, Cleveland, to your question about recourse, beyond the public comment itself, one of the things that we have to, and Philip has it right on here in chat, Philip writes here, can congressional legislation overrule VA rulemaking? Very good. That's exactly where I'm going. Because a regulation of a federal agency cannot outpace the statute that enables that regulation to exist, okay? So in the hierarchy, a statute outweighs a regulation. So if Congress were to say in some way, shape, or form, hey, wait a second, this type of process with respect to these conditions that we're talking about here, tinnitus, sleep apnea, et cetera, is not acceptable for the following reasons, that could be a role that Congress could play to head this off at the pass. The other recourse, of course, if this does go into effect, is the court system, right? Where the courts can say the VA has, in doing this, gone too far. The VA has, in our judgment, done things that they are not authorized by federal statute to do. We see an example of this right now with the caregiver program, with the class action lawsuit of Bodette versus McDonough, where the argument there of the class is, look, you've gone too far. The statute that developed this program said X, Y, Z, and you've gone beyond the confines of X, Y, Z. So that can be recourse as well. So there's different ways you can attack this to either prevent it from happening, or if it does go into effect, to hopefully get it scaled back.
Perfecto, right on. Thank you, Benjamin. And Patrick, you wanted to interject.
Sure thing. So these panelists are amazing. I learned so much today, and I thank you all for your time. And I wanted to touch on something that Benjamin was speaking about, the ambiguity and how veterans are going to, if this goes through, how we can even prove that our condition exists and the symptoms are still bad and that our ability to earn is still impaired, right? So the only way to, at this time, I believe, to check the severity of sleep apnea is to do a sleep study. So you're telling me that they can only do 2 sleep studies per night in all of Long Island. At the VA in Northport, they can do 2 veterans per night. So the list of veterans to have their initial sleep study done to get their initial diagnosis is 6 months long. So now, if we bring all these vets back in that are trying to prove that their symptomology is still meets the 50% criteria, that means they're going to have to do sleep studies every 3 months. That's impossible. So even if, you know, we get through all the ambiguities that Benjamin brought up, which is a very important aspect of this, but then the burden of proof. How, in any way, is a veteran going to even have a sleep study to be able to prove that their symptomology is still the same as it was in order to retain their current level of service connection? It's going to be next to impossible to do based on the current level of sleep studies that they can even do in a day, which is 2 per day. So I wanted to touch on that because the burden of proof is already very difficult to achieve, but then how to prove it, right, is going to be very difficult because you'd have to actually do a sleep study, which to go to the VA and do it is a very long wait list currently. And that would only get longer if they were having to do multiple sleep studies in order to prove the current state of veterans' sleep apnea. So it's a very difficult thing they're even trying to do in the best case scenario. So I just wanted to touch on that. But again, I just want to thank you all for caring so much about veterans and for your time and expertise regarding this, because I really learned a lot listening to you all today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And that is such a great point. So just for we need to close. This has been such an informative conversation. I mean, I learned so much. I hope that everybody who's joined us today learned as much as I did, if not more. And just for parting thoughts, if you could say one sentence to the folks reading all the comments from VA and considering these changes, if you could speak to the person who gets to make that decision for what VA is going to do next on these proposals, what's the one sentence that you would say to VA? Benjamin.
Write with clarity and consider the full realistic effects of these conditions upon veterans, not the effects that you might just find in some textbook or some old study from years past.
Dr. Jacobs, sir.
Just because a condition coexists with another condition, such as tinnitus coexisting with hearing loss, should not negate the disability that is presented by that condition itself and separate from the other. Tinnitus stands on its own as a debilitating condition that affects a person in every aspect of his life, her life, totally differently and apart from hearing loss. It has different causal reasons. It has different implication. It has different treatments. It is a different animal completely, totally, that affects everyone in a different way.
Mike, what would you say to the decision makers at VA on these proposed rating reductions?
I would say to them to remember the oath that our veterans gave and the promise that was given to veterans that they will be cared for after we sent them to war.
Word. Thank you, Mike. Patrick, what's your, I know you have an entire packet to send them, but what one sentence would you want to top line for the decision maker at VA on these rating reductions?
Oh, thank you. So I don't believe that money savings should be the predominant factor in this regard, especially since we've spent $2.5 trillion fighting these wars. And it is our duty to take care of our disabled veterans when they come home.
Absolutely. And Brad, I'm going to give you the last word. What's the one sentence you would say to the decision maker at VA?
I really wish I could have gone before Patrick. We are people. Veterans are people. We are not statistics. It is not VA's job is not to balance the government budget. They should not be making these changes based on budgets, based on cost savings. All veterans took an oath. Changes to the VAS or D should be based on medical literature and impairment to earnings. VA should not be making these decisions based on budgetary matters.
Absolutely. And if it's not obvious already, I am in full violent agreement with each one of you. Thank you to all of you powerful, amazing, informative, important panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and wisdom with us. Thank you to everybody who joined us today for this important conversation. Again, the public comment is open on these VA proposals until Monday. I dropped the link in the chat, but you will see a follow-up email from me within the next day or so. There will be a video of this event available on our YouTube channel. I will send you that link. I will send you some additional information, some links to studies, and some links to some of the items that we talked about today, as well as to where you can go and make your own comments. And we encourage you to express yourself to our government so that it can do the bidding of the people. Thank you for your time today. And with that, we will wrap up this Zoom. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
You too.